Hey guys, I'm Caden. I'm the guitar tech here at Booth Music, and today we're going to talk about a few things that go into a good guitar setup, and maybe a couple ways you can determine if your guitar could use a setup. So first thing, if somebody brings me a guitar and says that it does need a setup, the first thing I'm going to do is look down the neck, just something like this. You can close one eye and kind of sight down one line of the neck here. What we're doing is checking to see whether the neck is straight or if it's got some type of a bow to it. So that's adjustable using the truss rod, which on most guitars is going to be up here underneath the plastic cover. What we can do with that is we can dial in how much relief the guitar has. So relief is if the neck is coming up and kind of curving this way. Obviously that's exaggerated. But something like that versus if it's got too much back bow. So if the neck's coming up and then falling off backward. It's easy enough to see if you look down the neck, you can kind of see whether your neck is leaning one way or the other. What we want to do is use the truss rod to get it straight and maybe have just a little bit of relief dialed into it. Just that's going to make it so your strings aren't buzzing or ricocheting off frets, and so you're getting the optimum sound out of it. From there, next thing we're going to look at is the slots in the nut right up here. That's this piece where the strings are making contact at the end of the fingerboard. We're going to look to see whether those slots are wide enough for the strings to pass through. Sometimes people will buy a new guitar and they'll put on a heavier set of strings and they'll find the guitar's not staying in tune well or the strings are sitting up too high. That's usually because these slots here aren't wide enough to accommodate the bigger strings. A lot of times people will buy a new guitar that's set up well from the factory and they'll buy a new set of strings that's either heavier or lighter than what it was set up with. And then those slots need to be widened to accommodate the heavier strings. An easy way to check is when you're tuning your guitar, you may sometimes notice there's like a little pinging sound from up here by the headstock while you're tuning strings. That's a really good marker that just lets you know these slots are too narrow and need to be widened out so that the string can travel more freely back and forth through these slots. That's going to give you the optimal tuning stability. The strings aren't going to bind in there and go sharp or flat if you do a big bend or something. Then the other thing we'll look at is to see that those slots are low enough to the fingerboard. Sometimes, especially on new guitars, they'll be up really, really high. That can make it less comfortable to play chords here in your first position. And it also affects the intonation of the guitar, so it doesn't play in tune quite so well. Alternatively, on older guitars, these slots will wear out and they'll get too low. Then you might notice like buzzing sounds on your open strings. So we just want to make sure that these slots are at the right angle and, sorry, let's see. Stop there. So we'll go. We just want to make sure that these slots are at the right width and at the right height for your guitar to play at its best. From there, next thing I look at is going to be the action. So action is a word that you probably hear thrown around quite a bit, like this guitar's got a good low action. What that is the height of the strings off of the frets. So I use a little tool like this. It's got little marks down one end. So I set that on the frets and look to see what the measurement is for the string. Most people like their guitars set up with a low action, with the strings closer to the frets. That makes it easier to play, easier to press the strings down to the frets. There is a bit of a trade-off because with higher action, with the strings further away from the frets, you can really dig in, you can pick the strings harder, and a lot of people like the tone that provides as well. So it is kind of a balancing act, but it's something that we can set up specific to your playing style. So now we've checked the action. The last thing we're going to check will be the radius of the strings here at the bridge. A lot of guitars, like most acoustics, and like these two-piece bridges, like on this Gretsch, are going to be a fixed radius. The radius refers to the curvature of the strings like this way. There's a curvature to the front of the fingerboard here, and you want that curve to match the set of these strings here. So with the middle strings being a little bit higher than the outsides to kind of make that little curve. So where a lot of guitars are fixed, there are certain models like this Schecter here or like any type of like Fender style bridge where each string is adjustable up and down by itself. So each string has these two little screws and can come up and down. With that type of setup, it's easy for these to get out of radius or to have one or a few strings above or below that curve. We use a tool like this piece here It's got a few different radiuses marked on it. We just hold that up to the strings and make sure that they all meet that specific curve that'll match the fingerboard. Having that set up will make the guitar play a lot more comfortably, especially your chords. You know, down here, first position, as you move up the neck, you'll really start to notice if one string is too low. And then with your picking hand as well, it just is a little more intuitive. So that's a few of the markers that we look for in a good setup. Hopefully you can use some of these terms and definitions to kind of look at your own stuff and see whether you could benefit from a setup. Thank you.